Do you want to know why most MBTI compatibility recommendations turn out to be false or inaccurate or incorrect? Then keep watching this video. Hey, welcome back to Type Evolution, where we learn how to evolve through our personality type with the understanding of personality type theory. So this is a bit of a controversial video, and it's mostly meant for people who also have been thinking somehow the MBTI compatibility doesn't really match up. Something is lacking, something seems off. At least that was my impression when I started out with MBTI and trying out the compatibility recommendations. On my blog, typeevolution.com, one person asked me, why do you not think like this other YouTuber that INTJ and ISFP is one of the worst combinations? And why should I follow what you say, basically? And yeah, so I was like, okay, all right, well, I am primarily using Socionics theory. You might have noticed that already. I've got several videos about this. I've got the videos about the communication styles, which is a Socionic theory. I've got a video about the 3 subtype system, which is originally also from Socionics theory. Point number 1, why I think Socionics theory trumps MBTI recommendations, especially when it comes to compatibility. The first point is cognitive functions versus dichotomies. I used to be friends with someone who was certified in MBTI. They did some certification, and later on during our conversations, at the end they told me, wow, I'm actually really surprised, like I'm actually learning more about the functions from you than I did from my certification course. And that's because at least the standard MBTI certification course is reduced to the dichotomies, the Jungian dichotomies, which are introversion, extroversion, intuition, sensing, feeling, thinking, perceiving, and judging. That's why most MBTI recommendations are very simplistic, just based on those dichotomies. And it goes also back to Keirsey. I read his book, and in that book, Keirsey, his recommendations are the foundation of most MBTI recommendations. And Keirsey was well known for not applying functional theory. He was basing his recommendations only on what seemed to match well based on the dichotomies. So he was thinking, okay, sensing types should belong together and intuition types should belong together. Introversion, extroversion, that is complementary. J and P is also complementary. So that means the best type for, let's say, INFJ would be either ENFP or ENTP. So basically he was basing his complementary aspects only on the dichotomies minus N and S. He was convinced that nope, N people are I guess the superior race, at least not superior, but they should just stick with their own kind, and S should only stick with their own kind. And I think this is also one of the big reasons why there's such a snobbyism when it comes to N versus S in MBTI circles. Interestingly, this kind of issue is not as pronounced in Socionics circles because there they actually recommend N and S together. There's not that much snobbyism going on. There can still be some, but it's not as bad as in MBTI circles, where basically everyone who's N is smart and everyone who's S is dumb, so the dumb people should stick with the dumb people, the smart should stick with the smart people. In my opinion, it's really bad, right? So anyway, so it's just based on the Keirsey recommendations. Now, of course, if you go a bit further with MBTI, there are also people who have MBTI theory that goes more into the functions. So if you go a step further, it's the 4 functions. MBTI is also aware of that, usually the main function, the first function, secondary, tertiary, inferior. But their recommendations are not based on the functions at all. No functions in common. So let's say the very popular one or famous one, INFJ with ENFP, none of the functions are in common. INFJ, introverted intuition, extrovert feeling, introvert thinking, extrovert sensing, versus ENFP, extrovert intuition, introvert feeling, tertiary, extrovert thinking, and at last introvert sensing. So there's no functions in common at all, and that's a big issue. That's a big issue. When you know about functional theory, you can see how glaringly problematic this is. It's like suggesting that people who have opposite political views or people who have opposite religions or different religions would be the most compatible with each other. The 4 functions that you value are the 4 functions that are known in basic MBTI. It's almost like its own value system. So an INFJ prefers introverted intuition, extrovert feeling, introverted thinking, and extrovert sensing. Any type that does not also value at least half of those same functions is gonna clash in some way. Like I said, it's the same as if someone is a conservative and the other is, let's say, like a really extreme conservative and the other is really extreme liberal. Of course they're gonna clash, and of course, yeah, you can say, yeah, people can still make it work. It's the same like someone who's really religious and someone who's an atheist. Yeah, there are couples who can make it work, but it's way more conflict ridden, right? It's way more problematic. There are way more issues involved. And this is the same with MBTI or Jungian 16 personality types and clashing cognitive functions. And this is also something that I experienced in my own life. I was going through those recommendations. I was not necessarily dating all those recommendations, but I was checking, okay, so I'm typing this person this way, and how is the intertype relation basically going? And I realized whenever I was with a type that in Socionics is not that compatible, or basically a type that has opposing cognitive functions, there would be clashes and I would feel like I cannot be my true or whole self. That's why intertype relation theory is, in my opinion, superior to most MBTI recommendations, simply because they have a focus on the cognitive functions, and the cognitive functions are the true functioning of a personality type. The dichotomies are oftentimes also very much misunderstood and very much simplified to big 5. So, like I said earlier, usually when you are an intelligent person, you're gonna get an N result even though you're not N. It's just because they associate intelligence with N, or open-mindedness with N, or just because you are messy, you're gonna get a P result. Let's say you're messy, you're basically not conscientious, and then in the average MBTI test, on like the 16 personalities test, you're gonna get P. But this is not really what the functions are about. And I made articles about this, I made another video about this. The P and J thing is very much a big problem because it's just based on conscientiousness, and conscientiousness is a trait you can learn. So, and this is why many people end up typing themselves first as a P type, and then later, as they become more mature or more accomplished, they type themselves as J, because they learned how to be more conscientious. They learned how to be more orderly, or to be more punctual, to be more, productive, and so forth. But this is not really how Jungian types work. This is just superficial skills that you can learn, but they don't change the fundamental workings of your personality type or your psyche within. So this is why, once again, I find it really, really misleading and really, really problematic to give typings or to give compatibility recommendations just based on the dichotomy. So, okay, the second point is more about what people have an issue with when it comes to Socionics and MBTI. They say the cognitive functions are not the same. So we are not talking about the same types, and we're not talking about the same intertype relations, right? Well, I have to say this is actually an issue that only comes up if you religiously stick to a system. Think about it. If you religiously stick to either MBTI or Socionics, you're going to have this kind of viewpoint. Why? Because if you just recognize that Jung was able to perceive 16 personalities amongst humanity, or at least also functionally, he was able to take note of the 8 different functions. Now, then why are we debating that one system is talking about something else than the other? They're both talking about the same thing, right? They both have 16 personalities. They both have the 8 functions. They both have the same source material. So, you know, like, how can you say we are not talking about the same thing? We are talking about the same thing. And I also made a blog article about this, and I might have to make a video about this. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, because there's a lot of people out there who think it's wrong to equate in quotation marks, MBTI and Socionics, and I'm not equating them. I'm very well aware that MBTI and Socionics have different takes on certain functions, or let's say rather cognitive functions or information elements. So for example, in MBTI there's often the emphasis on introverted sensing and memory and the past, whereas in Socionics the emphasis more on how you personally experience the world with your physical body internally, which I think is a bit more accurate, because it goes really much more into introverted sensing, literally into the words themselves, internal, introverted, and sensing physical through the senses. Yeah, so this is way more close, and the MBTI one is, I would say, influenced by correlations. You might wonder, okay, so why do I still would type ISFJ as I lead in MBTI, SEI as I lead in Socionics? And that's because I still think the both two systems have different but complementary views. So, okay, you could still say, oh no, it's a contradiction, they describe totally different things. But when you really think about it, there's still something to it that connects the two of them. So you might know that there is a certain area in the brain that is associated with smell, and it's closely connected to memory. And smell, right, is sensing. So smell and memory are very closely interlinked. And I've been thinking about that, and I also, like I said, on my blog I have descriptions where I describe introverted sensing both from MBTI and Socionics perspectives. If you still think there are different systems, fair enough. Even if you still think so, I would still say the overall principle remains that having the same cognitive functions makes us way more sense for compatibility, as I mentioned in the previous point. So even if you think, okay, MBTI and Socionics, not the same at all, I would still go with the principle that the same cognitive functions are the most compatible with each other, because they have the foundation in terms of cognitive values. Okay, I need to hurry, I need to wrap this up because I'm in a hotel room and the cleaning lady wants to come in. Next point, mistypings, right? So you might still argue with me and say, well, it doesn't really matter, your principle of the same functions doesn't really matter. I am married to someone who has a personality type that is the opposite, has the opposite cognitive functions, or I'm this, I'm that, and all that stuff, right? There's just a very high chance that there are mistypes, okay? The problem is most people are not that, they don't have that much knowledge or understanding of the MBTI or Jungian types, right? Like, think about it, like, are you really an expert? And yeah, you could say you're not really an expert either. I would still say I know more than the average MBTI person. So whenever you see someone in a group, on a forum, somewhere, saying, I am this personality type, I am that, like my partner is that personality type, and we are very happy, and that's all against the Socionics stuff, or usually they don't even know about Socionics. Oh, you can say this is all debatable, right? It's all debatable. You can check out how I type people. The type that has introverted sensing first, extroverted feeling second, is going to be either ISFJ in MBTI or SCI in Socionics, even though in Socionics it has a P at the end. But like I said, even in Socionics, the systems are not perfect, okay? It kind of belongs to the previous points. I also don't agree with how Socionics treats P and J oftentimes. It's the same problem with the conscientiousness. It's the same thing. So even though I'm like kind of promoting Socionics theory here with the intertype relations, because I found that cognitive functions matching up ends up being really accurate. Still, I'm not 100% behind Socionics theory either. It kind of goes into my last point, my method, how I use compatibility or recommendations in the 16 personalities. I am not rigidly following any of the systems. I am primarily following Socionics, but if you are really rigidly following Socionics, like religiously, you would only date someone who is a so-called dual and would ignore all the other types. In my opinion, this is also a big problem because I don't think this works for most people. I am actually also concerned with helping people. I'm actually concerned with making sure that people can make the best decision for their life circumstances, but having a decision that is still good and not too bad, right? I pretty much subscribe to the principle that having the same cognitive functions, doesn't even matter necessarily what the order is the most compatible, because it's like this foundational value system in terms of cognitive functions. It basically means which cognitive functions you prefer using and you prefer other people use as well, because it matches your own views. That's just natural. NFJs and STPs together, NFPs and STJs together, SFPs and NTJs together, NTPs and SFJs together. In MBTI terms, these match up, okay? And this is my basic recommendation. I don't say you should only date a dual. In terms of Socionics, I say ideally you are with someone or you're spending most of your time with people who are in the same quarter as you. That's ideal. But as I said, there can be exceptions. And yes, there are intertype relations in Socionics that are like good enough, that are fine, also not in the same quadra. And there are also other reasons why they could even be good for you in other ways. But still, personally, based on my own experience, I found the most growth and I felt like could be the most myself with a person, with someone in the same quarter as me, who is quite compatible with me personality-wise. That's just what I found. So this is why I recommend that. That's why all my TBT types have 4 type recommendations that are based on the quadras, and one anti-recommendation that is like avoid, which is basically a conflictor in Socionics. So this is basically what I use as a system. And as I said, it's also about what actually helps people, what is actually the reality. I think it's unrealistic to tell people you should only date this one personality type. It's unrealistic because there are so many other factors going into this. Attraction is a big one, and no, not every person is going to be the most attracted to their dual. Attraction can be so much influenced by your childhood. It can be influenced by the society you live in. It can be even influenced by male-female dynamics. For example, I've seen that basically all the STP female celebrities I've typed, none of them has ended up with an NFJ guy. They all ended up with STP guys who are like them. And I think it's because STP guys, they fulfill the woman's desire for masculinity. So these masculine-feminine dynamics, based on society, make certain types more attractive than others. And some people don't like someone who has a personality that is opposite to them. That can also happen. Some people just prefer being with someone who has a very similar personality to themselves, who's also an introvert, for example. So the good thing about the quadra recommendations is you're going to have a type that is like the most complementary in terms of like the most opposite, but still has the same cognitive foundation. Then you have a type that is almost doing that in the same way, but you share either introversion or extroversion. Then you have a type that is basically the same type as yours. And then you have a type that is almost like the same type as yours, but it also differs on extroversion and introversion. So you have like 4 options based on your own preferences, your own attraction patterns, and that's good. I think that's the best. I think that's the best recommendation you can do. At the end of the day, it's up to you. But yeah, this is my view. I think it's the most accurate, of course, but as I said, it's up to you what you think. So yeah, let me know what you think and see you in the next video. Bye!